Artifacts are enclosed behind glass and mounted onto white walls, an ethological display of priceless artworks from a far-off land. This is a quote by the New York Times from Charlie Wilder, and it illustrates the way how artifacts around the globe are showcased in important institutes. The British Museum being one of these places with many historically and culturally significant artifacts and items that are important and require a safe place. However, these artifacts are also from foreign countries, and many of those countries want their artifacts back, with many museum goers agreeing and believing that this isn't acceptable anymore since many items were acquired unethically. As quoted by the National News, as a result of its controversial colonial past, Britain has been the target of frequent and varied attempts to return objects seized from regions, including the Middle East and Africa, in eras gone by. So that brings up the question, my research question, of should the British Museum return its artifacts to their country of origin? One side to this argument is that the British Museum should return items to the countries who want them back. Many artifacts were forcefully acquired during Britain's colonial era from different places around the globe and can therefore be argued that these artifacts shouldn't belong to them and should instead be returned. As said in a Quartz article, in the late 19th century, Britain sought to wipe out the Kingdom of Benin in what became known as the Punitive Expedition. The city was set on fire, and hundreds of trinkets, bronze sculptures, and valuables were stolen and later handed to the British government. And even though they were taken and placed in a museum, doesn't mean that they're safe. Time magazine talks about how many of the artifacts housed in the British Museum were stolen. It states, in August, the museum announced that 2,000 artifacts with a net value of millions of pounds were believed to have been stolen from its collection. The theft has renewed debate over contested artifacts in the museum's collection, many of which were acquired under British colonial rule. This museum, this Institute of Culture and History, was essentially looted from many times, valuable objects being taken without a real trace. This irresponsibility with its collection of artifacts just further paints this picture of the British Museum being unsafe to house cultural significant items from historical times. However, that is only one viewpoint to all of this. The opposing side is that the British Museum should not return their artifacts to the countries that they came from. One reason supporting this side of the argument is that legally, they belong to the British Museum. In a writing by Observer, it says, "The British Museum Act of 1963, a national statute which prohibits the institution from returning works. This works by the British Museum Board of Trustees is barred from returning any object in the collection unless it's a duplicate, physically damaged, or unfit to be retained the collection, and no longer of public interest." So legal-wise, the British Museum can't return the artifacts and that they belong to the British Museum. Furthermore, another reason that the British Museum shouldn't have to return their items is that museums are here to educate and provide a view to their audiences of many different countries and culture and history. If we take away artifacts from the British Museum, we take that educational, cultural, and historical value away from those audiences. The New York Times backs this up when it said that the fact that the British Museum is one of the world's great attractions where anyone can view in one place the achievements of human history is one argument against repetition. The British Museum is a place where history can be viewed by anyone in one place, and by returning its artifacts to their home countries, this wouldn't be the truth anymore, and those objects' values wouldn't be seen by as many anymore. So, why does it matter whether or not museums such as the British Museum keep or give back their artifacts? Why is all of this an issue? Well, museums are institutes, drawing in tourists and crowds, showcasing and educating the youths and public about historical artworks and items. They get to show the world all of these different historical things and the beauty of them all. However, they do make a profit from it, and the countries the artifacts come from say it doesn't belong to the museum. The countries that these items come from have deep cultural significance, and they find it important that those objects are respected, taken care of, and properly preserved and celebrated. When it isn't in its original country, their cultural significance can't be shared with its people. It's an issue concerning what people believe is right and what should be prioritized. Education and the showing of different cultures and history to all, or the preservation and rightful owning of significant artifacts.